The archivists of the Northern Sky Sect would later record this moment as a fracture point, when alliances bent under unseen pressure and the calm surface of the Divine Dao began to crack. Ling Han stands at the heart of it, no longer merely a rising cultivator, but a variable no one can predict. The echoes of the previous clash still linger: broken formations, unsettled grudges, and the quiet realization that strength alone may not decide what comes next. In chapters 1647 to 1648 of Recap, Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Dao, the tension tightens like a drawn bowstring. Old enemies reassess, new dangers stir beneath calculated smiles, and every step forward feels like it could trigger something far greater than a single battle. The question is no longer who will win, but who has already begun to lose without realizing it. And as the pieces shift into place, one truth becomes harder to ignore. Some moves, once made, cannot be taken back. In the silent stillness of the ancient mountain, where even the wind seemed to whisper secrets of forgotten ages, Ling Han suddenly felt a chill crawl up his spine. Behind him, something was following. He turned sharply, and what greeted his eyes was enough to freeze even a seasoned cultivator's heart. A bone, a single bone, white as polished jade, hovered not far behind him, as if it had been trailing him all along. Ling Han's scalp prickled, cold sweat forming instantly. This was beyond absurd. A bone, following him? And not just that, it had been hiding. It had deliberately concealed itself, evading his perception until this very moment. If he hadn't abruptly turned around, he might never have discovered it at all. Was it alive? Ling Han descended slowly, stopping about 3 meters away. He did not dare act rashly. Though it was only a bone, it radiated an aura so terrifying, so profound, that even he felt a deep sense of danger. The bone seemed to be observing him as well. Then, in a bizarre and almost comical motion, it shook slightly and began to sink into the earth, slowly burying itself, as if pretending it had never been seen, as if hoping to slip away unnoticed. Ling Han blinked, then couldn't help but laugh. "Hey, I saw you!" The moment his voice rang out, the bone jerked upward in shock, popping back out of the ground. Its form bent slightly, like a startled creature recoiling in alarm. Ling Han's expression stiffened. What in the heavens was this thing? "Can you speak?" he asked, though even he felt the absurdity of questioning a bone. Yet to his astonishment, "Can you speak?" A response came, not through sound, but directly into his mind. A thread of divine sense, soft and fragile, like the babbling of an infant learning its first words. Ling Han froze. "My name is Ling Han," he said slowly. "Do you have a name?" "My is Ling Han." The bone echoed him, word by word, clumsily and slowly. Ling Han pressed a hand to his forehead, feeling a headache coming on. This thing, it had consciousness, yes, but it was like a newborn mind, barely grasping language, capable only of imitation. He exhaled and sat down cross-legged on the ground. The bone hesitated, then tilted slightly, as if studying him. Then it tried to mimic his posture. But lacking legs, it awkwardly buried half of itself into the earth, giving the illusion of sitting. It looked almost like a puppy trying to imitate its master. Ling Han couldn't help but feel a strange sense of amusement. He began to speak casually, avoiding anything complex, simply guiding it through simple words and sounds, hoping it might develop its own voice. Time passed. Half a day later, "Yeah, yeah, yeah!" The bone suddenly cried out, no longer merely copying him. Though the sound was meaningless, it belonged to it alone, and it seemed delighted. "Yeah, yeah, yeah!" it chirped repeatedly, brimming with joy. "Can you speak now?" Ling Han asked. "Can you speak now?" "Yeah, yeah!" it echoed happily. Ling Han sighed. This was going nowhere. Still, the bone no longer seemed afraid of him. He stepped closer, examining it more carefully. The bone was extraordinary. Its surface was not merely white. It shone with a jade-like luster, flawless and pristine, devoid of any trace of malice. It was like a piece of art crafted by a master, though that master's taste must have been exceedingly strange to shape it into a bone. Etched across its surface were countless intricate patterns, impossibly complex. Ling Han studied them briefly before dizziness overwhelmed him. They were even more profound than the celestial formation he had once obtained. His thoughts drifted. What connection did this bone have to the celestial corpse atop the mountain? The strange sensation he had felt earlier, it must have been when he was observing that corpse. This bone had likely sensed his gaze and followed him since then. No ordinary cultivator could reach that height. Thus, no one else could have awakened it. Was this bone a fragment of that celestial corpse? Had it somehow gained consciousness? Ling Han sighed inwardly. Was he truly a magnet for trouble? Other people explored ancient ruins and encountered normal opportunities, but whenever he did, things turned bizarre beyond reason. "Do you eat?" he asked, taking out some food. He placed a portion before the bone. The bone tilted, watching intently. It seemed eager to imitate him, but without a mouth, it could not eat. Frustration bubbled. "Yeah, yeah, yeah!" It cried out anxiously, then suddenly, a flash of green light shot forth. "Pa!" The food vanished instantly, reduced to nothingness. "Yeah, yeah!" The bone cheered, its mood brightening immediately. Ling Han's eyes widened. That power. It wasn't just strong. It was terrifyingly strong. He estimated that even if he gave it his all, he might barely match that strike. This bone, it was like a child emperor wielding absolute authority. A casual motion could overturn heaven and earth with no force capable of restraining it. But how? How could a mere bone possess such power? How had it awakened? Ling Han rose and continued descending the mountain. Behind him, the bone followed, copying his every movement. Yet as it moved, something incredible occurred. It began to absorb the spiritual chi of heaven and earth, and from nothing, it started to grow a body. Flesh formed, limbs emerged, a torso, a head, complete. Soon it stood as a figure of flesh and blood. Though it lacked a true soul, its body was cloaked in a haze of primal chaos, making it impossible for ordinary eyes to perceive clearly. Ling Han stared, speechless. The form it had taken was him. A near-perfect replica. Its appearance was identical, though its aura remained different. But the bone didn't care. It wasn't trying to deceive anyone. It was simply a child, wanting to resemble him. Only upon close inspection could Ling Han detect the truth. The original bone still lay hidden within that body, its true form concealed. The disguise was flawless. With this layer of flesh, its aura was subdued, now appearing to be merely at the early stage of the Saint King level. This was actually beneficial. At least it wouldn't shock others immediately. "Yaya!" it exclaimed, overjoyed. Now possessing a body, it could finally produce real sound, not just communicate through divine sense. Ling Han smiled faintly and took out a set of clothes from the Black Tower, tossing them over. Clothed and complete, the two figures descended the mountain together. Before long, they encountered the heavenly phoenix Divine Maiden and the others. "Yi?" The group froze. Two Ling Hans stood before them. One had gone up the mountain alone, yet now he returned who looked exactly like him. Ling Han gestured casually. "This is Xiao Gu." "This is Xiao Gu," the figure echoed obediently, sounding dull yet eager. Long Shangwei burst into laughter. "Senior brother Ling, why does he copy everything you say?" "Senior, brother, Ling, why does—" Xiao Gu immediately repeated, full of enthusiasm. The group fell silent. Then their expressions twisted into something indescribable. Who, exactly, was this person? Or rather, what was it? The journey had barely settled into a steady rhythm when an unsettling presence began to ripple through the air. Though the aura emanating from Xiao Gu was faint, so faint it could easily be overlooked by ordinary cultivators, the heavenly phoenix Divine Maiden and the gathered saints were far from ordinary. Their senses brushed against that hidden power, and in an instant, they understood. This seemingly simple, childlike figure was a saint. And yet, what stood before them defied every expectation. A saint, repeating words like a parrot. A saint, wearing a naive, almost foolish expression, as if trying to imitate the world around him. Was this truly fitting for someone who stood at the peak of existence? Ling Han let out a soft chuckle, the sound breaking the tension. "His personality," he said lightly, "is a little unusual." Unusual was putting it mildly. None of them had ever seen a saint like this. No overwhelming aura, no imposing dignity, no towering pride. Just a blank curiosity, like a newborn child discovering the world for the first time. "His personality is," Xiao Gu echoed, word for word, his voice trailing awkwardly as if testing each syllable. Long Shangyue could no longer hold back and burst into laughter. This was simply too strange. Saints, by their very nature, stood above the masses. Even the more approachable ones, like Ling Han, the heavenly phoenix Divine Maiden, and the other newly ascended saints, still carried an invisible authority. But Xiao Gu, did he even consider himself a saint at all? Ho ho ho. Xiao Gu laughed along, mimicking the sound without understanding its meaning. Like a sponge, he absorbed everything: voices, expressions, emotions, learning without question. Ling Han shook his head, then gestured forward. Let's move. The next mountain awaits. And so, the group pressed on. As they circled the mountain, Ling Han recounted the strange and unsettling scene he had witnessed at the summit. His words painted a vivid picture, one that caused the heavenly phoenix Divine Maiden and the others to grow solemn and stunned. Yet Xiao Gu remained expressionless, not because he didn't care, but because he was still learning. Every sentence Ling Han spoke, Xiao Gu repeated with unwavering patience, echoing each word like a shadow trailing behind sound. At first, it was amusing. Then it became irritating. Having your own words repeated endlessly beside your ear, it was enough to test anyone's patience. But time, as always, brought change. By the fourth day, Xiao Gu had evolved. He no longer repeated everything blindly. Instead, he became selective. Words he had already heard and understood were ignored. But anything new, any unfamiliar phrase, he would repeat with excitement, as if discovering a treasure. Ling Han watched this transformation silently. He chose not to reveal Xiao Gu's origins to the others. To him, Xiao Gu was not a terrifying existence or a hidden danger. He was simply a child, an innocent being wearing the shell of a saint. And that innocence was something Ling Han wished to protect. Their journey continued across lands that had clearly been traversed by many before them. Signs of past cultivators appeared here and there, torn garments scattered across the ground, remnants of tragic encounters. No doubt, those who left them behind had met their end in the jaws of demonic beasts. Though creatures like the Black Panther were rare, a pattern emerged. Each mountain seemed to harbor one powerful beast. Time flowed like a quiet river. More than a month passed. Then, at last, the mountains vanished. Before them stretched an endless plain, vast and boundless, as though the earth itself had been flattened by divine will. And cutting across this expanse, like a celestial scar, was a colossal river. Its roar echoed like thunder. The river was unimaginably wide, spanning 1,000 miles, and its length was beyond comprehension. It surged from some distant origin, its waters churning with immense force. Occasionally, towering waves rose skyward, each one reaching heights of thousands of meters, crashing down with earth-shaking power. It was a sight that commanded awe. Within those waters, terrifying creatures lurked. Massive fish, with sharp horns, sliced through the currents. Gigantic crocodiles with 6 legs and bird-like tails drifted beneath the surface. And then there were the turtles, ancient, colossal beings whose shells resembled entire mountains, their presence blotting out the sky when they surfaced. Each of them radiated terrifying strength. Yet none of them left the water. They existed in quiet dominion, undisturbed and uninterested in those walking along the riverbank. Ling Han and the others had no intention of testing their luck. This river was no ordinary body of water. Within it surged the patterns of the great Dao itself. One wrong step, one careless move, and even a saint could suffer grievous harm, so they walked along its edge. After all, where there is a river, there is a source. And perhaps the Empress and the others had followed this same path. 10 days passed in the blink of an eye. The plains began to change. Vegetation grew more abundant. Life flourished in greater variety. Beasts, both weak and strong, roamed freely. But there was something unsettling about them. None possessed intelligence. They were driven purely by instinct, ferocious, savage, and devoid of reason. Soon, herbs began to appear, yet their quality was lacking. From spiritual ocean tier to shattering void tier, from mountain river to heavenly body tier, they gathered what they could. But anything beyond the eternal river tier was rare. And saint tier herbs? Not a single one. Throughout all this, Xiao Gu continued his strange exploration of the world. Whenever he saw an animal, he would rush over and embrace it. A wild bull? Hugged. A giant elephant 10 times his size? Also hugged. He treated them like toys, holding them tightly until he lost interest, then letting them go as if nothing had happened. The sight was both absurd and strangely endearing. 3 days later, the scenery shifted once more. Before them appeared a patch of land unlike anything they had seen. A barren, blackened circle, about a mile in diameter. From afar, a foul stench drifted through the air. It was a smell of decay so potent that a single breath made one's head spin. At the very center of this desolate zone lay a piece of rotten meat, black, decomposed, almost indistinguishable from the surrounding darkness, but it was the source of that horrifying stench. Ling Han's eyes narrowed, his expression shifted, then hardened with realization. That, he said slowly, is a death mushroom. The others were stunned. That rotten meat was no ordinary decay. It was a saintly medicine, a death mushroom, a horrifying existence said to be born only from the corpse of a saint king. When a saint king perished, their body, filled with boundless power, could sometimes give rise to such a thing. But this was no blessing. It was a curse. Saints were meant to return to the heavens upon death, their essence merging back into the world. But a death mushroom defied that natural order. It devoured the remains of a saint king, absorbing their essence, imprisoning their will. Such an act was hated by heaven and earth. And so, the death mushroom carried a terrifying poison. A curse so potent that even saint kings could perish if they consumed it directly. To swallow it was to invite the power of a saint king into one's body. And if one could not withstand it, they would explode from within. Yet, if its poison could be refined, it would become a peerless treasure. Even among saint-tier medicines, it stood at the very peak. Ling Han's previous gains had been mere level 17 small saintly medicines. But this was a Saint King great herb. It contained the martial intent of a fallen Saint King. Even Saint Kings themselves would find immense value in studying it. But obtaining it was another matter entirely. Within that mile-wide radius, not a single blade of grass grew. Life itself had been extinguished. Even a Saint King approaching it risked being infected by its poison. This was not something brute strength could overcome. It was a curse acknowledged by heaven and earth. And yet, something was missing. If the death mushroom had grown from a Saint King's corpse, where was the skeleton? Ling Han and the others exchanged puzzled glances. But Xiao Gu, he paid it no mind. To him, corpses were nothing new. What intrigued him was the strange, unfamiliar thing before him. Ling Han's gaze sharpened. How? Do we harvest it? The question hung in the air. The notionless saint stepped forward, his expression resolute. With a wave of his hand, origin power surged outward, condensing into a massive spectral hand that reached toward the death mushroom. But as it extended, a dark chi rose from the ground. It corroded the hand, bit by bit, relentlessly. Before the spectral hand could even touch the mushroom, it disintegrated, and the backlash came instantly. The notionless saint groaned, his face pale. He raised his right hand, and all eyes widened. A patch of black had appeared on his palm. Strange, writhing patterns flickered within it. The poison was spreading, upward, rapidly. He tried to suppress it, tried to halt its advance, but it was futile. Without hesitation, without even a flicker of doubt, he acted. His left hand turned into a blade. With a sharp motion, slash blood sprayed into the air. His right arm was severed cleanly at the elbow. The limb fell, but before it could even touch the ground, it turned to ash. The silence that followed was heavy. The poison was that terrifying.